Hello, everybody. My name is David Spark. I am the producer of the CISO series. We produce a few podcasts and a video chat, but I want to introduce our panelists. I'm going to get through this as quickly as possible so we can jump into the discussion. I should mention that your questions, your feedback are welcome immediately. So if you've got any questions or comments, there is a raise your hand feature. If you click on the participants at the very bottom, there's a little, then you'll see an icon on the right that says raise hand, or you can just chat something. Anyways, questions are going to be sent to me directly. So if it pops in your head and you want to know about it, I'll get to it as fast as I possibly can. All right. Myrna Soto, by the way, their names are on all their photos, so you'll be able to tell. She is the Chief Strategy and Trust Officer over at ForcePoint. Rebecca Weekly over there. I would say like above to left, right, but I know that everybody's configuration is different, but you'll be able to see their name. She is the Senior Director of Cloud Business Strategy and Platform Enabling, Senior Principal Engineer at Intel. And Rinki Sethi, she is the CISO over at Rubrik. And Kate Kuhn, there's Kate in the regal giant white chair. She is the Senior Vice President of Alliances at vArmor. So let's just jump right into it. There has been a significant amount of digital transformation that has gone on in just the past few months. Guess what? It's been COVID that's forced it to happen. So, Rinki, I would like to know from you, let's think days before, let's say end of February, days before COVID, and today, what has been the most significant change? What are you doing differently now that you weren't doing before?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the biggest changes is that everybody is now working from home. But I have to say that at Rubrik, we're only a 6-year-old company. And so we are mostly SaaS, mostly cloud, and half our sales force was already remote before COVID. So when everybody had to shelter in place, there wasn't a drastic change, and it was actually a really smooth transition to have folks completely work from home. We already had this right security practices and the capabilities for folks to go ahead and work from home.
So you were mostly cloud-based to begin with, yes?
Yeah, almost 100%. We have a little bit in-house servers and things like that, but we're like 99% SaaS and cloud. And I think the biggest change for us was our customer base, that many of our customers, we help them with cloud data management, backup and recovery, and they had everything. Many of them weren't using cloud. They were fully in their data centers, and we're helping them with managing backup and recovery there. And now they wanted to shift, either become hybrid, have some other means of making sure that they've got their data hosted somewhere else, because you can't send folks easily to the data center and so forth. So there was a drastic change there where we now had to accelerate and help our customers make that shift.
So I got to assume there was a huge sort of pressure on customer service at that time, because there was just this huge demand for lift and shift all at once, yes?
That's right.
All right, let me shift this over to Rebecca. The same exact question for you. And by the way, the story you tell, Rinki, is one I've heard again and again. Those who are already fully cloud-based had the easiest time here. Rebecca, what's your pre and post-COVID story?
It's similar. I mean, obviously for Intel itself, we are a manufacturing company. We build systems. We are doing a lot. So there's a very different methodology that we take towards our own internal business. But from my lens, my division, what we're really looking at is a massive number of customers moving to the public cloud with a different profile. So not necessarily what Rinki is experiencing, right? We're seeing 3 to 5 years of business transformation happen in months. And normally when a company looks to a cloud strategy for disaster recovery or business continuity, they want to do a detailed risk assessment of their entire security process, right? Their assets, the vulnerability that they might be facing, the likelihood of exploitations, anything that they might want to do around expected loss analysis. I mean, usually this is a very detailed, well thought through CIO-led process. And we have not necessarily seen as detailed a process coming across, because this is being viewed more as disaster.
So let me ask, so personally, do you view that good or bad? Like, hey, it's pretty good that they're moving fast. And yes, I know it wasn't done the way they normally like, but the net result is what?
Well, I hope it will be good. In general, I think the cloud is going to offer us a lot more in terms of the ability to de-risk through, the assets that are available there. I mean, obviously multiple availability zones, just standard good practices, but, and less of a single point of failure model. So that's a great thing about cloud service providers in general and what they offer. When something goes fast and not necessarily deliberate, I think we can see massive outages and unexpected behaviors like what's happening with Garmin right now. So we want to think through, I think everybody should be thinking through the kinds of services they need. I mean, fundamentally, cloud service providers are offering you shared assets. And so the way you want to come in from running your own private system, private cloud into a public cloud service provider should be deliberately and with courage of conviction to know what you're getting yourselves into, what your right models are. And actually, I'm very excited to hear.
By the way, is that still very, like, you're talking about the methodical, deliberate mechanism here. Do you feel that is still happening even though there's more of a rush happening?
I generally find in times of rush, people are a little fast and loose. I hope that's not the case. I certainly think this is not new news for the major service providers. They have been talking about their security models, their threat models, the logging capabilities they have. They've been working on integrations here for a very long time. It's been 2+ years since, Microsoft has had SGX enabled, secure enclave enabled confidential computing services, Amazon, Microsoft, each of them are offering solutions in this space. So I think it's there for you if you want to think it through. Not necessarily that the people who are making the disaster recovery plan are being led by their CISOs to look through this as deliberately as they should. And the latest news that's coming out in terms of exploits, I think, is making people pause what they started in March and say, okay, maybe we do need to rethink our strategy here, not just about, disaster, but long-term business continuity planning.
All right. And let me throw out to all the journalists who are listening, if there's any questions you have specifically to this sort of fast ramp-ups, please enter it now, and I'm happy to field as many of those as possible. I want to throw this now to Kate and Myrna, a sort of a variation on just the last question, though specifically talking about the customers. Kate, you first. As they are moving much faster than expected, unless they were fully 100% cloud, as in Rinky's situation, not that horrible a move. I mean, nobody likes this, but it's not that tough a move. What are your customers' top concerns during this rather accelerated time?
So I think we saw it really in two waves. So the first concern, if you think back in the March timeframe, and it was our concern too, was how do you immediately go from an on-prem culture or an office-based culture and go quickly to remote workforce? And I remember one of our customers, we have a heavy proliferation of financial services customers out of New York calling because 93% of their workers were in offices. And in less than a week, they had to go full remote. So the first thing is, do you have the infrastructure? Do you have baseline security? Are you able to make that shift? And so our first priority was working with our customers to gain the visibility necessary so that they weren't in compliance issues, that they had the right policies, and that they could make those shifts. And for ourselves as well, I mean, while we've always been able to work remote, we have a heavy office culture. Most of our engineering, we have a culture-based company, and we usually are traveling to be in front of our customers. So for us too, it was about a 2-week, very intensive, full culture shift to make sure that all of our employees were enabled to do their jobs remotely. So it was a very similar journey to our customers. And then how do you maintain the culture? What we're seeing now is the second step, and I think Rebecca hit on the head as far as digital transformation, is that ideal of digital transformation is now the reality. So now that the shift has been made, they've gotten over the initial, okay, breathe, we are remote. It's, okay, now what have we done? And what I mean by that is, when you think about, many companies were either in the start of a hybrid journey, we're looking at starting to do more in SaaS, we're doing things to make those into the roadmap. And now that roadmap has become the reality. And so do you have the right security tools in place? Do you understand interdependencies? And I see a huge spotlight across our customer base in visibility, in the ideas of what is your data doing? How are your applications talking to each other? What is the anticipated, expectation of the applications and the data within the environments? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? And then how would you line policy to ensure moving forward that you're not doing something that's going to be detrimental to your business? And so, we saw a very quick shift of, okay, let's go fast. And now it's, all right, have we done the right things to make this long term the right ability for our customer base? It's interesting. We've seen a huge shift in financial services. We're now seeing a major spotlight on healthcare. So it kind of has been going and now energy as well, hand in hand with, all right, what's the first thing? Now, what is the national critical infrastructure that needs to look as well? So that's been an interesting trend that we've seen.
Hold just the thought for all of you, the interdependency issue. And let's come back to that. But I want to first have Myrna answer the first question, which is, what are your customers' top concerns during this digital transformation? What are they coming to ask you? And are they missing some key questions that you say, hey, have you thought about this?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. And similar to what's already been shared, I think the number one thing that we're seeing is the fact that in the first time in modern business history, CISOs do not have the comfort level of their traditional security program and controls because the network has dramatically changed. The fact that, we've talked about this significantly at ForcePoint, that we believe in what we call a human-centric cybersecurity approach. And the silver lining that I see of what's happened is not only did companies who were thinking about their digital transformation, planning for that perfect opportunity, somewhat got pushed into the droves of having to do so, but to many of the comments made previously, what we're seeing is a lot of customers that are now looking at certain capabilities that they didn't necessarily look at before. So whether
dig into that specifically.
Sure. So something in the nature of cloud secured gateways that they maybe didn't consider before. Now they're looking to kind of adopt things like insider threats and being able to understand behavioral analytics, which is really a cornerstone to the human-centric cybersecurity paradigm. One of the things that we see a lot of customers, whether they're directly asking for it, but getting there after some conversation, is understanding that the perimeter before was blurred whenever you had a hybrid model. Now the perimeter is completely obliterated and your perimeter is actually the user. So looking at how do we protect the user, because the user now is always been an asset to the company, but now is a critical threat vector from hijacking and things of that nature. Our network is our kitchen, our kitchen counter, our home office. We're dealing with consumer grade networks at this point. So the need to really look at data protection and user protection at a very, very granular level, I think is one of the things that we're seeing a lot of our customers talk to us about. Some of the things that we, from our organization standpoint, we've been talking about this user-centric cybersecurity program. Again, gateways, cloud security gateways, no pun intended, but we just did an announcement regarding a new converged platform. But we're also very heavily focused on user analytics, behavior analytics. This is the type of visibility now that CISOs are saying, I can't see anything. I don't know who's printing where. I don't know who's sending what. I've got a proliferation of unmanaged devices that are extreme concern to me as a CISO to an organization. So going back to what Rebecca was sharing, there was this convergence, this must-do move. Now people are saying, okay, great, we did it. We remain business. The business kept going. Now I'm really worried. Now my lack of visibility is a significant concern.
All right, I want to take this now to Rebecca and to Rinky about, it's interesting, this Thursday I'm releasing an episode of one of my podcasts about specifically secure access. And what we did is we talked at great length about the multitude of technologies we've been using over the year, but to what you just said, Myrna, about the need to focus on identity. We've heard this again and again. The endpoints are no longer the perimeter, the user is the perimeter, or maybe both for that matter. So I'd be interested to know, is the secure access story changing for you, Rebecca and Rinky, now that we have a new paradigm? Maybe not new, it was always around, it's just accelerated or more top heavy in one sense. how are you addressing the secure access, and are you looking into new technologies? Are your customers looking to new technologies? I'll start with you, Rebecca.
Sure. In no way is it new to have to do identity, access control, authentication, attestation. I think for me, sitting in this seat at this precise moment, it's the difference between everybody needs it now. There's a massive inundation. The buildup is not yet necessarily there to support the inundation. Everybody wants it to be totally secure as an afterthought, but now primary afterthought, since it's the entire risk to their earnings, their future, their everything. So then they want deep performance optimization, which usually means hardware acceleration, and they wanted it 3 months ago, and in hardware it usually takes us a little longer than that. So I think that has been probably the most interesting and exciting part of sitting where I'm sitting. We have a lot of solutions, both solutions available via FPGAs and software, firmware, patches. So we are doing, more patch releases, more optimizations of the way in which those are rolled out, patchlets to try and help people not download so much over their network. Obviously, I already talked about secure enclaves, expanding the capabilities and the memory enclave sizes because people need more support, trusted and execution environments, and new SDK drops to make sure that firmware is what it should be. So I think it's just more. It's more and it's faster because you're only as secure as the layer below. So we can have a great secure gateway, but if we haven't done the work to make sure that the person who's accessing it is who they should be, then that's not going to work very well. And just, every single layer down to the silicon, the firmware, we've got to know that we are backed up by a hardened root of trust. So a lot of work. A
defense in depth strategy.
Exactly. All
right, Rinky, let me ask you, what, I guess, has your secure access defense in depth strategy, more I'm going to talk about your customers. Has that changed and also teasing the discussion of integration that Kate had mentioned? Are there new integration parameters that you're dealing with that you hadn't had to deal with before?
I think secure access, especially in a modern company, like in the way that Rubrik is kind of been built, you're dependent on secure access. And so identity and access management and all those things have to be the strongest because you don't have everything's not within your own perimeter. You don't have the same network controls. So secure access is everything. I think the interesting thing is with our customers, right? As we've been, and keep in mind, I've only been at Rubrik for 1.5 years. Prior to that, I was at companies like the ones that our customers, identify with, which is hybrid environments, making a move to the cloud. And I think the interesting thing is a lot of companies right now, especially our customers, they're looking at moving to the cloud pretty rapidly. And as we all know, and as many of us have mentioned, it's not an easy switch. It's not like you decide today, I'm going to go and do something in GCP. It's a transition. You've got to re-architect things. And a lot of our customers are trying to understand cloud. And now you've got to expand that to understand, how do I secure access in the cloud? What is AWS or GCP providing me with? And now what do I have to augment with that? And a lot of security vendors, I think, are behind right now in keeping up with that as well. So when you look at the integrations and how it's very, very complex, and I think our customers are feeling like, who's going to help me with this big problem? And we may not have the talent that we need around us, depending on where they're located, to help us solve for this. So I think it's a pretty big challenge.
Yeah, I've got to, if
go ahead, Myrna, jump in.
I just wanted to kind of build upon a couple things. When I mentioned user as the new perimeter and the effect of a human-centric cybersecurity, I'm not even talking about identity and access management. To me, that's a static protocol. That's a static protocol. You onboard me, you give me credentials. Maybe if you're good, you're managing my role lifecycle management. When I speak about human-centric cybersecurity, I'm talking specifically about the ability for us to apply policy enforcement based on the user's behavior, the user's activity, so that the static nature of a block and tackle doesn't apply to everyone, but that we have the capability of looking at activities and heuristics, be able to say, and I'll use myself, Myrna's exhibiting very risky behavior. She's done the following things that are outside of the norm of what we would expect her role and profile to do. Maybe she's been hijacked. Maybe she's deliberately doing something, and applying policy enforcement in that nature. completely dynamic and adaptive. To me, the static nature of all of the other security controls, some of them are table stakes, you're never going to throw them out, but it's really yesterday.
I would completely, I'm going to jump in too for a second.
Sure.
Completely agree. Like when you think about, and Myrna, you hit it on the head, being an ex-CISO, we lived in a very static world. You expected a tool to do this, you expected a user to do this, and that's all thrown out the window when you start to think about where we're headed from a hybrid cloud perspective. It is dynamic, and we have to understand profiles, and we have to understand behavior. And what the secure access question we've been talking about has really done is move this idea of zero trust from everybody's favorite buzzword to something that has to be real and tangible. And if you look at the cloud providers, if you look at what Microsoft's released the last couple of weeks with their zero trust initiatives, if you look at what AWS is doing, we have to make the dynamicism that's promised through the concept of zero trust a reality. And what it's really bringing to the forefront is an idea that I really was frustrated about when I was a CISO, which is there is a lack of ecosystem amongst security tools. So, I used to pray that, tool A would work with tool B and not break tool C. And dear God, hopefully everything works together. And what we're finding is that in this dynamic new world, you have to have an ecosystem of solutions that work together. And please don't tell me you're going to throw another agent in my environment. Work with what you have. And so when you think about secure access, and Myrna, I completely agree with you that we are officially in borderless enterprise. The buck stops with the user. And so you have to think about it from a zero trust perspective. You have to think about it from an education perspective. And you have to think about it how you now take a very static brick and mortar security philosophy and make it extremely dynamic. And that's all changed it's all hyperbole we've discussed for years. But now we're looking at reality that's less than a couple months old.
Absolutely.
So integration is a story that comes up a lot that I've heard from many CISOs from that matter. And in fact, it's so severe that ironically, like one of the issues they see is if they see an overlap of two products doing exactly the same thing, not only will they examine those two products, but then they'll start looking at a third. So it's very conceivable that those two overlapped will disappear, and a third, they could displace two complete products that are overlapping with a third. Let me ask all of you, and I'll start with you, Rebecca. Whenever we are forced to do something unexpected, there are unexpected hurdles and unexpected benefits. So maybe you can tell a story of dealing with a customer of something that you didn't plan on, and because nobody planned on this, was a sort of an unexpected hurdle. And then at the flip side, maybe it's something, a silver lining, an unexpected benefit that came out of this as well. And the benefit could just be, hey, we got this done a lot faster than we normally do.
Yeah. I wish I could say definitively made it a lot faster than we wanted to. Again, hardware can be a little more challenging to do overnight. But I do think, I guess the best example, and I probably can't share the customer's name, so I won't.
I understand that.
They needed to do a massive rehaul of what they were doing. Intel releases Intel platform updates on a biannual basis. And they're fairly large platform updates with every security, every quality enhancement, any issue we've seen across all of our platforms. Customer did not have the ability to roll out at scale reliably for the size of their fleet, that massive update. And so had to completely rework our update policy in how they could roll out and what we were giving to them. So much smaller, patchlet, curtailed, optimized for them to rinse and roll, and to try and go for, seamless reboots. So to be able to ensure that any update to the firmware was happening without them actually having to bring a user down. Because when we're really thinking about the kind of security
and that,
model,
by the way, that's normally what has to happen. You have to bring a user
usually
down?
I mean,
okay.
If you think about it from your client perspective, of course, every Wednesday you probably have your IT department doing the right thing, making you do a secure patch update to Windows, to any aspect of your home system. You see it with your Apple phone, you see it with anything that you operate, right? You're gonna reboot it, and you're going to make sure that it has all of the security patches applied. But the cloud doesn't want to do that, because the SLA, the service level agreement that they have made to their customers, is an always up time. It's 5 nines. So when we think about secure patching in the cloud, we're actually trying to do that where it's completely obfuscated from the user. And there's aspects of it where it's, VM migration, and you won't notice that you've been migrated to another server. And of course that server will physically come down, and there are firmware updates that are going to require that. But increasingly, we're looking at how you can push updates midstream without affecting users. And that's true whether it's firmware updates to an SSD or whether it's firmware updates to the CPU. So I think, we have just scratched the surface of what an always available cloud methodology for updating firmware is going to look like. It's actually, out of every crisis, right, you have the opportunity to really rethink the model and the methodology. So that's one of the ones that I'm really excited
Let me
about.
just dig into just that part where you said that you had to change all these policies for this client who needed a massive update, just simply wasn't able to do it. And you had to do it, I guess, segmented for that matter. What did that mean to Intel of, we made this sort of, this new policy block, if you will? What did that mean to you? Is that something you could roll out to other customers, or in terms of the way you were rethinking the way you normally do policy like this?
Yeah, I think it really is, we have a Six Sigma mentality, right? We're a manufacturer. We want to do one thing. We want to do it most excellently, and then scale it to everybody. And I think coming into this world, we've been in the world of cloud first for, I think 3+ years is when BK first stated it, before even Bob came on board. And, thinking through the methodologies that were right for client, or the methodologies that were correct for how we went into the initial server design in a very OEM focused world, where everything's going to be updated when they ship out the server. It's going to operate in more of a secured on-prem environment versus cloud, always on, millions of CPUs, reliability, uptime. It's just an entire thought process shift of the kind of pillars in a security assurance model. So I think this is just one example. And yes, absolutely. You pathfind with one great customer who pushes you to think through it differently. And then you say, well, everybody who does this cares about it this way. Nobody wants to lose the reliability of their servers. And so, of course, we're going to scale it to everybody, do it the right way. I pray every day,
All right. Rinky, I'm going to ask you the same question about the sort of positives and negatives during this time. What was an unexpected benefit and an unexpected hurdle?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we saw with our customers was, COVID kind of gave, as a country, as a world, we weren't ready for a crisis. And Rubrik's been kind of established to help folks with, how do you deal with a crisis? You want to make sure you can go and recover, you can back up quickly, or that you already have backups, and that we're going to help you with recovery. And I think, obviously with Rubrik, it's not an overnight implementation. It takes some time, but a lot of our customers just said, this is one of our top priorities right now, is to now make sure that we have backup recovery everywhere in place. Whether we just focused on our data centers before, but now we need to start thinking about cloud as well. And these were the same customers who before, when we were sharing with them, hey, we should come up with a comprehensive backup recovery strategy, may have hesitated a little, or were looking for funding. Now they had the funding. So I think the interesting thing was, we've helped our customers now have a comprehensive backup recovery strategy. The interesting surprise was, especially in the healthcare industry, that we've heard now again and again with our customers, one of the things you hear now in the backup recovery space is, it's really important to have immutability. You can't have backups that can be changed afterwards, because if you get hit by a ransomware attack, your backups may no longer be valid to recover from. And a lot of our healthcare customers who were proactive in getting those in place, we were now able to help them with being able to just recover quickly and not worry about ransomware. And that was kind of a little bit of a surprise for everybody. I think that this was what helped them with ransomware. They may have, some of our customers had the preventative and detective capabilities around the ransomware. Some didn't, and all they had was their recovery solutions to help them get back to business and be able to run while they figured out what happened. So I think that was a kind of a big aha moment. And we do have a ransomware product too, but even without that, I think it was just to be able to have that recovery in place. And I think this is becoming a bigger thing just in terms of incident response, disaster recovery. Companies are really focused on this. I think cybersecurity practitioners have been kind of like we need to think about what happened with COVID more in the cybersecurity space as well, and make sure we're focused on one of the key fundamentals, which is disaster recovery.
You know, it's interesting. I spoke to one company. I'm not going to mention their name, but they solely sold themselves as a backup solution. And as soon as they changed their marketing to say that we are a business continuity company, sales went up eightfold. Insanity. And
Yeah.
it was solely, they didn't really change their product that much. All they did was change the marketing around it. All right, Kate, I want to, Myrna and Kate's answer to this question as well regarding unexpected benefits and unexpected hurdles. Myrna, I'll ask you first. What did you not expect to be a hurdle in this? Let's certainly look at the last 4 months, and what was a nice silver lining?
So I would say what I didn't expect to be such a hurdle would be the fact, and I repeat what I said before, the realization of visibility, right? People, I think a lot of people had already embraced a hybrid cloud environment, had already had a portion of their workforce working remotely. But then of course, when this dramatic shift happens, the fact that there were so many CISOs that said, holy cow, what am I gonna do? And I don't want to be the person that says the sky is falling, but the reality is that we are all in a very vulnerable position right now, because many organizations are still trying to figure out how they can increase their security controls now in this current work environment. So I'd say that's the number one hurdle. And as a cybersecurity practitioner for the greater part of my life, you know, it makes me nervous for the CISOs that are out there having to manage these environments. Fortunately, there's a lot of things that can be done to do so. So the silver lining from my perspective is the number of customers that are understanding not SaaS, but the SASE architecture for security. So secured access at the service edge. So now we've been talking about SASE for quite some time. A couple of other vendors in the marketplace have been talking about the power and prowess of SASE. We did a full-on bet on our SASE architecture for our converged platforms. And the silver lining is that now it has been validated. It has been validated beyond belief. And it's, in our opinion, the way that we're going to be able to introduce, deliver, and we're doing it today, deliver converged capabilities on one single platform and eliminating I have to have 70 different point products running for me to do this cross-section of controls. So to me, that is the silver lining. SASE finally got validated, and for a reason that nobody ever expected, but it's been validated, and I'm very much looking forward to the future of how that's going to progress.
Listen to the Thursday episode of My Defense in Depth. We talk about SASE.
Awesome.
Kate Kuhn, what was your unexpected benefit and unexpected hurdle during this last 4 months?
So I couldn't agree more with Myrna. Her insights were pretty much spot on with ours. I think from a hurdle perspective, it's interesting. The hurdle was almost us. As a small company and as a startup, we were anticipating kind of a retrench of business and kind of having to really focus on, you know, what are we going to do and how's it going to work? And the reality is with the focus on visibility, with the focus on, you know, acceleration of hybrid models, we had to be off to the races in many different areas that we weren't anticipating the volume and the necessity of what we bring to market from a visualization, application relationship management perspective. So it's been an amazing time for us to learn about how viable application relationship management is right now in the current environment. The interesting thing, and I think what's been the silver lining for us is I have never, you know, the joke is I'm a CISO and went to the dark side and now I work, you know, for a security company. I've never seen a time in our history where there is more close alignment between CISOs and security teams and CIOs and vendors and companies like ours.
Is this just sort of out of like aggressive need? I mean, is that it?
It is. It's absolutely aggressive need. Our customers have become our family, and we're a very culture-driven company. And so having access to have direct feedback and understand, one customer called us, you know, I need you to be the Google Earth of my environment. I need to be able to see the world view, the country view, the street view. I need to know whether my neighbor's door is red. and being able to take that and understand how we could make that happen for them. We had another customer say, I need you to be the orchestrator of orchestrators and take, everything from bare metal to our cloud environments and make it work in one seamless graph. And so it's been fascinating, the collaboration between our ecosystem partners, our customers, and ourselves, and how important culture has become in this time. And what Myrna said, I preached visibility for a lot of years in my career, and I've been in security longer than I'd like to admit. And to see some of those things that we preached and Myrna and I have had those conversations. We preached a lot of times standing up on stage at RSA become a reality. It's validating, and it's also terrifying because now it's here and we have to do something about it.
Well, it is a good thing they didn't ask you to be the Ask Jeeves of your security environment. Trouble. All right. I've noticed that our journalists have not been piping up, so I'm going to harass you guys a little bit, and ladies as well. I know that we have Jessica and Bree on as well. They joined a little late. We have Dawn and Tony as well, and Famita. Thank you. Do you have any questions? I got plenty more questions to ask here.
I actually do.
Sure.
And I looked, and for whatever reason right now, I am not seeing the hand waving thing. So I couldn't even.
It's all right. Whatever. Just pipe up.
And my apologies for the landscaper who is right outside my window, like 3 feet away. But
we don't hear him.
No, my question was, there was a lot of talk about, there was the initial, like, oh my God, we're all shutting down, everything's remote. But then there's been this transition. So it's like, initially were you guys yourselves and the customers you're dealing with viewing this as more of like a hurricane response? Like, I need to hunker down for a couple weeks, and then things will go back to normal. And how have things changed? Because I've seen a lot of companies who went from like, oh, we're going to be shut down for 2 weeks, and then it was like, oh, we're going to be shut down for 2 months, and now there's this realization of, this is going to be semi-indefinite. And a lot of companies have actually embraced it to say, actually, we're finding we're actually more productive and saving a ton of money on office space, in the long run. And this is just how we're going to do things. So from the perspective of security, what is that? How did that transition kind of progress?
And I want to just add one thing. That's a good thing. I want to just add one thing. And you may have zero vision into this whatsoever, but because they don't need so much office space, possibly that's a huge reduction in costs. I don't know if, how much leases that they're still stuck to for that matter, but is that going into security's pockets? I don't know. Anyways, to answer Tony's questions, Rinky, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've heard also from a lot of my tech peers, especially, that it has been more productive working from home. And I've heard that about 75% of the workforce wants to stay home until there's a vaccine out anyway. And so enabling that is going to be really important for companies. But when I do talk to my peers, I think more than the 2 weeks and 2 months and, going back to work, I think the bigger challenge has been each company, depending on what industry they're in, has been hit from a business perspective when it relates to COVID. So budgets, even if they're saving from office space and not having to spend all this money there, it's not necessarily going into IT or cybersecurity budget. And so depending on what company you talk to, there's still a lot of budget implications from an InfoSec perspective on, are we going to go and spend more, or do we need to hold back and really tighten up and see what's to come? It's been a lot of uncertainty, even with our customer base. As you look, they're looking at everything, and some like retail companies that were always online, they're seeing a boom in business, whereas other kind of brick and mortar shops and restaurants and other places, they just don't even have the money to do anything right now. So it's kind of been different depending on industry and that kind of thing.
And quickly, anecdotally, I just add that I interview a lot of CISOs, and at the end of all of our shows, I always ask, are you hiring? And prior to COVID, almost all of them said they're hiring. Now about a third say they're hiring. I'm sorry, Rebecca, go on.
No, I was going to just jump right in on this. It's a tale of many verticals, right? And those which have already embraced the cloud versus not. Those who are embracing the cloud are jumping in, but they're doing it with a very cost conservative mindset. And so it's really about, how do I do this so that I de-risk my business, I enable productivity, but I also do it in a fashion that will allow me to make changes in 6 months if I decide to spin down this business, spin up something new. So I think, those companies that have come forward quickly and said, hey, we're going to be doing remote work through June of next year, just go do your stuff, we'll figure it out, and sort of are giving as much guidance to their people and to their vendors and their partners about what their plan is, even if it's a midterm plan instead of a 5-year plan, are the ones that are being viewed as the most reliable, culture-driven, folks who are leaning in to be helpful in this space. But it's most of the cloud, at least, is driven by consumer demand, right? So if we are entering into, it's like 70% of cloud services, when you get under the hood, is not the infrastructure as a service layer, but it's those things that generate capital on top. So it's consumer driven. So as we look into a time where obviously we are entering into an active recession, there's a lot of uncertainty for all of these businesses.
We went into it as a look of, we hoped that it would be short term and we'd come back, but we actually planned for long term. And so making sure that we, from a cultural perspective, took care of our employees the same way as much as possible that we would in the office as we do now remotely. So do we have the right programming in place? Do we have the right infrastructure? Do we have the right tool sets? And we continually are monitoring that with our employees to make sure that they're comfortable with where we are. What we're seeing is a lot of our customers, I think the initial hope was that there would be, a return to work plan in the summertime. And what a lot of companies are finding is that to put the regulations in place, to put what would keep their employees safe in place, that we're seeing a lot of customers say, okay, we need to continue to accelerate our hybrid model. We need to accelerate our cloud, our move to SaaS, because we may not be full force back in the office until next year sometime. And it's funny, I think every single week we're getting another customer saying, we're not going back this year. We're not going back this year. What does that mean? So we're seeing a shift into, again, more focus on the interdependencies of, of infrastructure and supply chain. So what are the dependencies between the energy companies and the healthcare companies? What are the dependencies between the financial services, and, how do they play with maybe even different companies that you'd never even expect? Like, if the financial services companies go down, what does that mean to another industry? And so we're seeing companies start to plan for long-term that we could be trenched in for another year or two before they go back. I also think, to address the idea of spend, I don't know of a company that's increased at this point spending in security. They are spending in new and different points.
Right.
And,
I know you were about to say.
Yeah, I was going to agree with Kate. I mean, one of the things, and I'll just make a comment about what we're doing as a company. We're playing long ball on this, and we're doing exactly what's already been discussed, and making sure there is not going to be a rush to return. Obviously, we're going to pay very close attention to the circumstances, pay attention to our employee needs. There are some essential areas that require people to kind of flex here or there. But one thing that I absolutely am seeing, and it may just be because I'm on, and I love it when Kate said the dark side, on the dark side of the kind of the subject matter being on the sell side, is that companies, David, to your point before, they were hiring before, they're not necessarily hiring now, some are, some are not. There were security budgets, and now they've seen this digital transformation push, and they're saying, well, we got to do a lot more. We got to do a lot more, but we don't necessarily have the ability to scale our budgets 3x, 4x, 5x. So where can we do more with a greater efficacy with a converged platform? Because I believe that the winners, both on the sell side and on the buy side, the actual consumers and practitioners, are going to be the ones that remove the complexities of all the moving parts they have to manage. That goes to talent, that goes to scale, that goes to responsiveness. So if I'm seeing more and more CISOs, my former colleagues, that would always want that best of breed point solution to say, you know what, now in this environment, I got to do DLP, CASB, I got to do all these things in one platform because I can't train a bunch of different teams. I cannot do all these things. And oh, by the way, if I can save money in the process, perfect. And I think that is where we're going to see a lot more of the practitioner base really question the point solution approach. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of point solutions that are integral. And they're going to be very much a mainstay in our cybersecurity landscape. But where there is the opportunity to really, for once and for all, integrate and converge, it's like a dream come true, and comes with that expense reduction. And if it goes cloud first, well, you know what that means. It's going to be very expense reduction rich if you go the cloud first, cloud native versus insisting to put a box on-prem. And oh, by the way, where is that prem? We're all somewhere else now.
Focus on relationships and on dynamic versus static and event. That's what we're
Exactly.
seeing.
All right, hold on. I want to, Don, I know you have a question. Write down. We have about 10 minutes left, so I want to keep respecting everybody's time. Don, what is your question?
So I really was interested in Myrna's theme about monitoring employee behavior as the new thing we need to do more of. Now that seems like as a worker, I'm at the office with a company supplied computer. I'm kind of used to being monitored. Now I'm at home with my MacBook that I do many personal things on. It's not a company's, it's not a super Intel lockdown vPro system. It's doing lots of things which were kind of risky behavior. So I'm kind of curious about the actual physics of how you're trying to monitor that person and where it bumps up against kind of Big Brother over monitoring.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that is a very meaty answer that I'm more than happy to take offline, but let me give you the macro response. First and foremost, the way that we look at what we call the behavioral analytics of what the user is doing, it is irrelevant if they're using a company issued device or not when you use our capabilities. Now, that requires the architecture that I spoke about before, which is the SASE architecture, requires a lot of different things. But it does give us the ability to compartmentalize where it is that we're actually monitoring or actually analyzing. I hate to use the word monitoring. We're actually anonymizing and analyzing activities, then trying to apply a risk score to it. And if Dawn happens to pop up, it's because Dawn has hit these indicators of behavior that are just out of the ordinary, that may or may not require an extra look. So it's
may I ask, what do employees know of this?
They know it all. They know it all. It's all above board.
And how is it explained to them? Because obviously normal security speak is not as digestible. So what's the words? How is it described?
Yeah, think about I'm going to use the term legacy, even though it's not that old. But think of the legacy user analytics and behavioral platforms, the UEBA platforms. The way that we're looking at this type of capability is actually trying to apply a risk score based on dynamic data associated with the user and what it is that they're doing. So I'm just going to oversimplify and say, okay, you're on your personal time. You happen to be on this device that we are monitoring because you have logged in as an employee, but you're out on the web. We're not necessarily interested in interrogating that behavior. We are the minute that you download a copy of something from a particular database and now you're sending it somewhere. Okay, now we're flagging it. So from a user perspective, we believe in the complete transparency of what the rules are, what the indicator of behaviors are, what are the types of things that will be deemed risky or not. Now, granted, just like my statement before, threats evolve. Today, it may not be risky. Tomorrow it is. So there is a very dynamic, very sophisticated algorithm that's applied, but it's not about blocking. It's not about immediately blocking. Think of it like a credit score. David's going to have a credit score of 630. I may give David a lot more leeway in the monitoring versus someone that's got a credit score of like 320.
As I would expect.
Exactly. But that's how we look at it. And I welcome the opportunity to take it offline and give you a much more.
My credit score is higher, by the way.
No, you're
Famita, you've got a question. Let's hear it.
So I wanted to kind of touch back on the earlier response to Tony's question. I mean, there was a lot of discussion about how you're looking at flexibility, there's a lot of uncertainty. So I was wondering, in terms of contract, in terms of discussion, is it more that they're looking at ways that they'll be able to change their contract? Maybe you're looking at that people are looking at shorter contracts with their cloud provider versus like getting locked into like a 5-year plan. Like what kind of actions are they taking because of the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty and they need the flexibility because something might change again a month from now?
That's a good question. Was that for Ricky? Who was that for?
I think I was kind of basing it off what Rebecca and Myrna had said. So I'd be kind of curious what they would respond.
Yeah, I
Rebecca.
think partially what you're seeing is just an operational model shift right? Going to the public cloud enables you to have a more operational model for cost as opposed to capital expenditure. So it's just a mindset shift of, okay, our business continuity plan, our disaster recovery plan should be a cloud-based plan. That's what's going to enable it. I mean, I was working with a fairly large vendor in India, but they're not large enough to get access from the Indian government to get to their data center. So all of a sudden, overnight, they needed to know who they could actually work with that actually had access in that country at that time to their data centers and could start the migration. So I think, you know, it's that model of just cloud enables, no single point of failure, a little bit more access, and even cloud providers you wouldn't think of as like your first number one, you know, top 3, top 5 are in 50 zones, 100 zones. You know, it's just the nature of what they're doing. I think what, you know, my surprise has been in working with a lot of partners in this space is how much the buyer's remorse hits later because they don't know what they did. It's like, oh, we did this, great. Now I'm not meeting compliance specs here. I need to go look at what is actually happening. Oh, that service actually has a financial services player on top of it, or a healthcare provider, or it's energy sector and it's got different regulatory background. And probably my service provider has done some compliance checks, but let's go pull up that document and make sure that it's correct. So I think it's an assumption that we're going to de-risk our lives by doing this, and then not really realizing the privacy implications that Dawn brought up, not really realizing the security implications that might be coming up that when you have been a local player and not really thought about a geo-replicated, you know, secure business continuity plan.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that.
Go ahead. And by the way, I like the buyer's remorse thing. I would love to hear if there's been more like sort of buyer's remorse purchases, not necessarily your own products, but others, like customers like rushing to buy and not realizing what they were getting into. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rinky.
Yeah, I was just going to add one point. You know, as a customer myself, a lot of vendors have used this strategically to say that, hey, I know you guys might be struggling as a business. Can we offer you something? Just try us out, and you don't have to pay for us right now. And then if you see value, buy us, you know, pay for it in the future, kind of thing. And I think that's been good there. You've been leveraging this time to really build relationships, understand strategy, knowing that they're probably not going to get a deal out of it right this minute. And on the flip side with our customers as well, you know, especially in the backup recovery space, I don't think folks are going to say we're only going to do a 1-year contract. They're just not, they're going to need something that's longer term. But what they have been saying, hey, you offer all these add-on features. Is there something you can provide for us that, like, ransomware protection is an add-on? Can we do something where we can use it, see the value, because we do need it right now, and maybe in the future. And so we've had to work, you know, we have actually proactively kind of worked out, here's what we can do for our customers.
I just want to add, I think it comes down to kind of like that total cost of ownership perspective. And from our perspective, the thing that we're focusing on is time to value. So I talked to many of my colleagues, and I know that Kate and I have went through it ourselves, where we purchased products, we purchased things, and it took so long to see value that really that's where a lot of buyers and consumers are asking that question. Cloud adoption, that time to value is very apparent. You've got to take extra steps when it comes to other pieces of technology, especially in security.
All right, well, we literally have a single minute left. So I want to thank all 4 of you for joining today. Let me just remind you who speaking with Myrna Soto, who is the Chief Strategy and Trust Officer at ForcePoint, Rebecca Weekly. I subscribe every month. Oh, no, every week. I'm sorry, I take that back. She's the Senior Director of Cloud Business Strategy and Platform Enabling, Senior Principal Engineer at Intel. Also, Rinky Sethi, she are the CISO over at Rubrik, and also Kate Kuhn, Senior Vice President at vArmor. And I want to thank all the journalists who have joined us as well. I'm sure you may have additional questions. I asked someone at HireWire if you could sort of pipe up how further engagement can actually happen.
Yes, definitely. So the HireWire representative that you were in touch with, feel free to pass any questions their way. We'll also be sharing the recording with you as well. But thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everybody. And it is 11:29 right now. And I want to thank all of you for your time, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.